The night, Ian Trevors shoved open the glass door of the tiny diner he worked at and spotted the woman sitting alone on the curb. Soaked to the bone, something deep in his chest shifted, and he didn't know yet that his whole life was about to change. "Hey," he called out, holding his jacket over his head as thunder cracked above. "You okay?" The woman didn't answer. Rain poured down her face, plastering her dark hair to her cheeks. She looked up slowly, dazed, her lips trembling. Ian crouched down next to her, ignoring how the rain soaked into his jeans. "You hurt? Lost?" She blinked at him, looking like she was trying to say something, but her teeth were chattering too hard. "All right, come on," he said, standing and holding out his hand. "Let's get you inside before you freeze out here." She hesitated, then took his hand. Inside the diner, it was warm and smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs. Ian grabbed a towel from behind the counter and handed it to her. She was shivering hard, her expensive-looking coat dripping onto the checkerboard floor. "Sit," he said, pulling out one of the red vinyl booth chairs. "I'll get you something hot." "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice soft and hoarse. He poured her a mug of coffee and set it in front of her. "Name's Ian, you all right?" She looked at him for a long moment like she wasn't sure what to say. "I'm Veda Daniels. You got anyone I can call?" "No," she said quickly. "Just needed to get off the road. My car hydroplaned and slid into a ditch. I didn't know where else to go." Ian scratched the back of his neck. "That storm's not letting up anytime soon. There's a motel 2 blocks down, but they're probably booked tonight. You got somewhere safe to stay?" She hesitated again. "No." Ian glanced toward the back of the diner where his 8-year-old daughter, Leela, was curled up in a booth with a coloring book. He'd picked up an extra shift tonight because rent was late again. His ex had bailed years ago, and it was just him and Leela now. Still, there was something about the way Veda looked like the world had just kicked her in the gut and kept walking that made it impossible to walk away. "You can crash at our place for the night," he said before he could stop himself. Her eyes widened. "I can't, it's not much," he said, grabbing his coat, "but it's warm and safe." Veda looked at him like she didn't understand him, then nodded. They walked the few blocks to his apartment, Ian holding his jacket over her head again as the rain pelted down. His place was nothing special small. Worn-out couch, second-hand furniture, a tiny kitchen with a flickering light, but it was clean. And Leela had drawn crayon pictures on the fridge. "Daddy, who's that?" Leela asked, peeking out from her blanket fort on the couch. "This is Miss Veda," Ian said, helping Veda out of her soaked coat. She needed a dry place to stay tonight. Veda crouched down. "Hi, Leela, that's a beautiful picture you're coloring." Leela beamed. "Thanks, want to color too?" Veda's face softened in a way Ian hadn't seen before. "I'd love to." Ian made grilled cheese while Veda sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring with his daughter like they'd known each other for years. He kept stealing glances at her, how she laughed softly when Leela said something silly, how she tucked her hair behind her ear, how tired she looked underneath everything. And yet, even with her wet clothes and runny mascara, she looked elegant. Way too elegant for a place like this. Later that night, when Leela was asleep and the storm had turned into a quiet drizzle, Ian handed Veda a blanket. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said. "You can take the couch." She looked at him. "You don't have to do all this." "I know," he said. "But I want to." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you, Ian. You didn't have to stop earlier. Most people wouldn't have." "I'm not most people," he said simply. She gave him a look he couldn't quite read, like she was trying to figure him out. He went to bed on the floor beside the couch, the quiet sound of her breathing the last thing he heard before he fell asleep. The next morning, she was gone. Ian found a note on the kitchen counter, scribbled in neat handwriting. "Thank you for your kindness. You didn't even know me, but you helped anyway. I won't forget that. No number, no last name, just gone." He stared at the note for a long time. "Is she coming back?" Leela asked, rubbing her eyes. "I don't think so, baby," but he was wrong. 2 weeks later, Ian was fixing a flat tire outside the diner when a black car pulled up. Not just any black car, a sleek, gleaming town car with tinted windows and a uniformed driver. The door opened. Veda stepped out. Ian stood there, wiping his hands on a rag, stunned. She looked completely different, dry, polished, and dressed in something that probably cost more than his rent, but her eyes were the same. "Hey," she said softly, You okay? He asked, confused. She smiled. Yeah, I wanted to see you. Leela came running out of the diner, spotting her. Miss Veda, Veda crouched and hugged her tightly. Hi, sweetheart. Ian watched them, his heart doing something strange. I didn't think I'd see you again, he said, his voice low. I wasn't sure I'd come back, she admitted, but I couldn't stop thinking about that night. About you, he blinked. Veda, who are you? She looked at him, then took a step closer. Veda Daniels, CEO of Daniels Holdings. I'm a billionaire. Ian stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. And I'm here, she added, eyes searching his, because I think I left something important behind. He didn't say anything, just kept looking at her. I know it's crazy, she said, her voice shaking, but I felt something that night. And I haven't stopped thinking about you since. He stepped forward, finally finding his voice. You're a billionaire, yes, and you're here in front of my diner telling me this. Yes, Leela tugged on Ian's shirt. Daddy, are you gonna hug her or what? He laughed, shaking his head. Then looked back at Veda. I don't know what this is, but I'm not letting it go. Good, she whispered, and for the first time in a long time, something felt right. I wasn't sure you'd let me come back, Veda said as she sat across from Ian in the same booth where they'd first spoken. Her perfectly tailored navy coat was draped over the seat beside her, raindrops still clinging to the hem. Ian poured her a cup of coffee, setting it in front of her without a word before sliding into the seat opposite. He looked different now, his jaw a little tighter, his eyes more guarded. I didn't expect you to, he said finally, glancing out the window where her driver waited beside the sleek car. I know, she said quietly, wrapping her hands around the mug, but I had to. Why? His tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't welcoming either. Because you felt guilty for disappearing. No, because I didn't want to lie anymore. He watched her for a long moment, then leaned forward. So what exactly was the lie? She met his gaze without flinching. That night, I didn't tell you who I really was. I didn't want to be Veda Daniels, the woman people cater to because of her last name. I just wanted to be a person who was lost and cold and scared. And you saw me that way. Not what I own, not what I do, just me. Ian sat back, arms folded. You're still the same person, billionaire or not. But disappearing without a word, that wasn't just about hiding your name. You're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I panicked. I've never let anyone in like that. Especially not someone who didn't know what they could get out of me. I didn't want anything, he said, his eyes narrowing. I know that. That's what scared me. She reached into her coat pocket and placed a small plush rabbit on the table. Leela left this in the couch cushions. I thought she might want it back. Ian stared at the toy, then glanced behind him at the kitchen where Leela was helping the short-order cook unwrap napkin bundles. She asked about you once, he said. Then she stopped. I shouldn't have left her like that. Or you. Veda's voice cracked slightly, but she cleared her throat and straightened. I came to ask if you'd consider seeing me again. No secrets, no running. Ian didn't answer right away. He looked down at the rabbit, then back at her. You think you can just step out of a car like that and pick up where we left off? No, I don't want to pick up where we left off, she said. I want to start something real, he laughed then, bitter and low. You live in a world that doesn't even touch mine. You fly around in cars with drivers and staff who wait outside while you make confessions over diner coffee. I'm trying to keep the lights on and raise a kid who already knows too much about disappointment. I'm not asking you to change your life, she said. I'm asking if I can be part of it. On your terms. Ian looked down at his hands, calloused and rough from work. You don't know what that means. I'm trying to, she said. I've spent the last week canceling meetings I didn't care about, avoiding calls from people who only want something from me, and all I could think was how quiet it was at your place. How peaceful. How Leela looked at you like you hung the moon. Her voice softened. I've never had that. And I want to learn what it's like. Ian stood abruptly, grabbing the rabbit and walking toward the back. She followed, stopping when she reached the kitchen entrance. Leela looked up from where she was stacking napkins and gasped. Bunny, she cried, running over as Ian handed it to her. You found her, Veda smiled. I thought she might miss it. Leela turned to Ian. Can she come back to color with me again? Ian looked at Veda, who stood completely still, waiting. Maybe, he said. We'll see. Veda didn't press. She simply nodded. I'll go now. I just needed to say what I came to say. As she turned to leave, Ian's voice stopped her. You didn't ask what I do, she blinked. What? You never asked about my job or where I went to school or what I make in a year. I didn't need to, she said. I saw how you take care of your daughter. That told me everything. He didn't respond. I'm staying at the Langford, she added. For the next few days, in case you want to talk. She walked out without waiting for him to answer, the bell above the door tinkling softly behind her. That evening, after Leela was tucked into bed, Ian stood on the small balcony of their apartment, arms resting on the rusted railing. The city lights glittered through the mist, and he could still hear Veda's voice in his head. You didn't ask what I do, he hadn't, because he hadn't cared. He remembered the way she'd watched cartoons with Layla that night like she wasn't above it, the way she'd rinsed her dish without being asked, even though she clearly wasn't used to doing that. He didn't know what it meant yet, or if it could work, but he knew she hadn't come back for show. The next day, a package arrived at the diner addressed to Leela. No card, just a coloring book filled with princesses and a new box of scented markers. Ian stared at it, then picked up the phone. His hands hovered over the numbers. He didn't dial, not yet, but he didn't throw the box away either. The Langford's marble lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Ian stepped through the revolving doors, his denim jacket damp from the drizzle outside. He felt out of place the moment he crossed the threshold. The scent of polished wood and expensive perfume clung to the air, and the concierge gave him a second glance before nodding him toward the elevators. He'd never set foot in a place like this. But when Leela had fallen asleep with the new coloring book tucked against her chest and the faintest smile on her face, Ian knew he couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. He didn't text or call or send a message through the front desk. He simply rode the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Veda was already standing there barefoot, a loose sweater hanging off one shoulder and her hair pinned up in a way that made her look softer than he'd ever seen her. She stared at him, lips parted. You came. I didn't know if I should, he said, stepping out slowly. But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. She moved aside to let him in, and he stepped into a suite that looked like something out of a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline beyond, and a fire crackled in a modern hearth that didn't use wood. The scent of vanilla and something floral hung lightly in the air. Do you want something to drink? She asked, walking toward a small bar cart in the corner. I have tea or something stronger. Tea's fine, he said, eyes still taking in the space. You live like this all the time. No, she said, pouring hot water into 2 porcelain cups. I live in something even bigger, but I don't like it. He raised an eyebrow. You don't like your own house. I don't like what it represents, she said, handing him the cup and curling onto the white couch. I inherited it. I didn't choose it. He sat across from her in a low armchair. So what would you choose? She looked at him for a long time. Something quieter. Something that feels like a choice, not a legacy. You ever live without money? No, she didn't flinch. But I've lived without meaning. It's worse. He took a sip of tea, letting the heat settle in his chest. You think this us is meaningful? I think it could be, she said. If you let it. He leaned forward slightly. What happens when your board finds out you're spending time with a broke single dad who fixes cars and works night shifts? I don't care what they think. Her voice was firm now. They work for me. Not the other way around. And what about Leela? He asked. She's already attached. You disappear again and she's not the only one who'll feel it. I'm not going anywhere this time, she said, unless you tell me to. He looked down at the tea in his hands. You really want this life? The one where we live in a 2-bedroom, walk up with a leaky faucet and a neighbor who plays the drums at midnight. I don't want your life, she said. I want you. And Leela, the life we build together, that I want. He looked up slowly. That's a heavy promise. I know, she said quietly. But I've never made one I meant more. He stood, setting the tea aside. Then come see it for yourself, she blinked. Now, he offered his hand. You said you wanted something real. Come see what it looks like. Without hesitation, she took it. The cab ride to his apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzed with energy. Veda pressed her forehead to the window, watching the blur of streetlights and rain-soaked sidewalks roll past. When they arrived, Ian unlocked the door carefully to avoid waking Leela. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a star in the hallway. Veda stepped inside, her heels in one hand, her other trailing along the wall as she looked around. "She's asleep," Ian whispered. "But I want you to see this place when it's not storming out and you're not soaked to the bone." Veda turned slowly. "It's warmer than I remembered," he flipped on a lamp. "It's not much." "I don't care about much," she said, walking toward the kitchen. "I care about this." She picked up one of Leela's drawings from the fridge, a crooked house with stick figures labeled Dad and Me, and smiled. "You see the world through her eyes," she said. "That's what makes this place feel like home." He watched her, heart pounding harder than it should have. "I want to be part of it," she said, turning to him. "But not just for a night or a visit. I want to earn a place in it, with you." He stepped closer. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I do," she whispered. "I'm not asking for ease. I'm asking for you to let me try." He looked down at their hands, now intertwined, and then back up into her eyes. "Then start with dinner," he said. "Tomorrow night with me and Leela." Her eyes lit up. "What should I bring?" "Just yourself," he said. "And maybe a story about what it's like to live in a place with 20 rooms." She laughed softly. "Deal." As she turned to leave, her hand lingered on the doorknob. "Ian?" "Yeah," she looked over her shoulder. "I meant it. I'm not running again." He nodded once. "Good. Because next time I won't chase you." She smiled, then slipped out into the night, leaving the faint scent of vanilla and steel resolve in her wake. Ian stood in the hallway for a long time after the door closed, staring at the space she'd just left, wondering how someone so far from his world had somehow stepped right into the center of it. 3 weeks after the night she returned to his apartment, Veda stood in Ian's kitchen barefoot, sleeves rolled up, attempting to chop carrots with the concentration of someone trying to defuse a bomb. The knife was sharp, the carrot was stubborn, and the cutting board kept sliding. "Here," Ian said, appearing beside her with a folded dish towel. "Put this under the board, it won't slip." She glanced up, grateful. "How do you know all these little tricks?" "When you cook every night for a kid who once cried because her spaghetti noodles were too slippery, you adapt." Veda laughed, setting the board on the towel. "I don't know how you do this every day and still stay sane." He leaned against the counter, watching her. "You get used to chaos when your life's built around someone else." She paused, knife halfway down. "It's not chaos. It's care." Their eyes met for a moment too long, until Leela burst in from the living room, waving a paper crown made of construction paper. "Miss Veda, I made you a queen." Veda knelt as Leela placed the crown on her head, adjusting it with serious precision. "Do I look royal enough?" "You look perfect," Leela declared, then tugged her hand. "Come see the throne I made you." Veda glanced at Ian, who nodded. "Go on. I'll finish the carrots." As they disappeared into the living room, Ian turned back to the chopping board, a strange warmth building in his chest. He hadn't expected her to keep showing up, but she had. Not in grand declarations or flashy gestures, though she'd offered more than once to replace every appliance in the apartment, but in ways that mattered more. Picking up groceries without being asked, helping Leela with her school project, sitting beside him on the couch after long shifts and just listening, and tonight she'd cooked with him. Badly, but she'd tried. Later, after dinner had been eaten and Leela had fallen asleep in her blanket fort, Veda stepped out onto the fire escape with Ian, both of them holding mugs of lukewarm tea. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low, "about how strange it is that I only ever felt seen when I wasn't trying to be." He looked over at her. "You mean the night at the diner?" "I mean every night since," she said. "I've spent so long being someone people expected things from, but no one ever looked at me like you do, like I'm just." "Veda," he didn't answer right away. The city buzzed beneath them, car horns, distant sirens, someone playing saxophone 2 blocks down. "You know I can't give you much," he said finally. "Not the kind of life you're used to." "I don't want the kind of life I'm used to," she said. "I want the kind where I wake up and know the people around me aren't performing." He turned to face her fully. "You're sure?" She nodded once. "I've never been more sure of anything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Then I need to show you something." She stared at him. "What is that?" He opened it to reveal a ring. Not new, not flashy, a delicate gold band with a tiny sapphire set in the center. "This was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to me before she passed." Told me to give it to someone who made me believe in things again. Veda's breath caught. I don't have a yacht, Ian continued, or a mansion, but I've got a daughter who already loves you. And a heart that's been yours since the night you sat dripping in rainwater and asked for nothing. She swallowed hard. Ian, I'm not asking for forever in some castle. I'm asking for dinner every night, for being late because Leela lost her shoe, for fights about dishes and kisses before bed. I'm asking for a life, with you. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she laughed as she wiped them away. I don't care if we eat on milk crates or if the faucet always leaks. You and Leela are the only home I've ever really wanted. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her all along. She leaned in, kissing him soft and slow, the kind of kiss that didn't need fireworks or fanfare to feel like everything. Days later, they stood in a sunlit courthouse, Leela holding both their hands, wearing a white dress with sparkles and a flower crown she insisted on making for Veda. The judge smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife, and Leela squealed, hugging them both so hard they nearly toppled over. Afterward, they walked out into the city afternoon, no limo, no parade, just the three of them. A family. That evening, Veda handed Ian a set of keys. What's this? He asked, eyeing the ornate silver ring. Our new place, she said, grinning. It's not too far, 3 bedrooms, a backyard. Still in the city, but more space for us to grow. He looked at her. You bought us a house. I told you, she said, lacing her fingers with his. I'm all in. He stared at the keys, then back at her. So what do we do now? We go home, she said. Together. And as they walked down the sidewalk, Leela skipping ahead, the sun dipping low behind them, Ian realized something. He hadn't just fallen in love with a billionaire. He'd found the one person who saw his world and chose it anyway. The scent of fresh paint and new beginnings still lingered in the air as Ian adjusted the crooked frame on the hallway wall. It was a photo Leela had insisted on hanging Veda holding her hand in the backyard while Ian lit sparklers. The three of them were laughing, caught in a moment that somehow felt like it had always existed. From the kitchen, the low hum of conversation drifted out. Veda was seated at the breakfast nook, her laptop open, but her attention on the woman across from her. Mrs. Gallagher, their new neighbor from 2 doors down, was sipping coffee from a floral mug, her eyes wide with curiosity. So you're the one who bought the Barker place, Mrs. Gallagher said, her voice laced with approval. Never thought I'd see it fixed up again. You made it beautiful. Veda smiled. We wanted a space where our daughter could grow up with room to run, but still close to Ian's work and Layla's school. It just fit. Mrs. Gallagher leaned in. And Ian, he's a good one. He is, Veda said, her voice softening. The very best. Later that afternoon, while Leela was at a friend's birthday party and the house was unusually quiet, Veda found Ian in the garage, elbow deep in a wooden toy chest he was refinishing for Leela's room. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You're going to stain your shirt. He glanced up, saw her in one of his old t-shirts, and grinned. You own half a fashion empire and you're wearing that. You said it was your favorite one, she replied. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. It is. But it looks a lot better on you. She kissed his cheek, then stepped back. I have something to tell you. He immediately straightened. Is it bad? No, she said, laughing. Far from it, but it's big. He waited, eyes steady on hers. I stepped down from the board. Ian blinked. You what? I handed over control of Daniels Holdings to the new executive team. They're capable. They've been running most of the operations for years. I'm staying on as a consultant, but it's no longer consuming my life. He didn't speak right away. I thought you loved it, he said. I thought I did too, she admitted. But it wasn't the work. It was the escape, the structure, the distraction. Now I don't want distraction. I want to be here with you, with Leela. I want mornings that start with burnt toast and nights that end with storybooks. He stepped closer, brushing his knuckles against her jaw. You did that for us. I did it for me, she said. For the version of me that only exists when I'm with you. He kissed her then, slow and sure, his hands curling around her waist. She melted into him, grounding herself in the scent of sawdust and citrus soap, in the solid warmth of the man who had changed everything by simply seeing her. When they pulled apart, Ian rested his forehead against hers. You know, I was going to ask you something today. Oh, I had this whole plan, he said, Fancy dinner candles probably would have tried to wear a tie for you. Ian Trevors, were you about to propose again? She teased. I already did once, he said, but I never got to do it right. She tilted her head. What's your definition of right? Letting Leela ask you with a glitter poster board and 20 questions about flower colors. She laughed, eyes shining. I'd say yes every time. That evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the living room gold, Leela returned home with frosting on her cheeks and a balloon animal in tow. They made popcorn and curled up on the couch, Veda in the middle, Leela snuggled under one arm, Ian under the other. Are we going to stay here forever? Leela asked sleepily. Veda kissed the top of her head. I hope so. Ian reached over and took Veda's hand, lacing their fingers together on the blanket between them. I think we already are, he said. Months passed. The seasons changed. And their life unfolded not in grand declarations or climactic twists, but in the quiet, unwavering rhythm of love lived out loud. Veda started a foundation focused on education and mentorship for underprivileged girls. Ian expanded his auto repair business into a mobile service that catered to working parents who couldn't afford to leave their cars at a shop. They hosted neighborhood barbecues. Leela made best friends. The three of them grew into a family not born of convenience or circumstance, but of choice, every day. On the first anniversary of the night Veda had shown up at his diner soaked and lost, Ian surprised her with a rooftop dinner at home. He'd strung fairy lights across the pergola, grilled her favorite meal, and even let Leela paint Happy Love Day across the sliding glass door in washable markers. Veda stood barefoot in the grass afterward, watching the stars flicker to life in the sky, a glass of wine in her hand and Ian's arm wrapped around her waist. I used to think love had to be complicated to be real, she said. Ian chuckled. You sure found the right person to prove that wrong. She leaned into him. No, I found the only person who made me believe it could be simple. He kissed her temple. It's not simple. It's just right. They stood like that for a long time, the quiet hum of the city far below, the warmth of their home behind them, and the future wide open before them. And this time, Veda Daniels didn't walk away, she stayed. Forever wasn't a promise, it was already happening.